Now, if you're getting ready to go to court with a narcissist, whether it's divorce court or otherwise, you're going to want to be fully prepared, and you're definitely not going to want to walk in without having the best possible strategies and tactics at your fingertips, because this is going to be no cakewalk. The narcissist is going to make it as difficult for you as possible. So stay tuned and listen to the end so that you can get all the tips and you'll be all ready to go. All right, number one is have everything that's possible to be in writing, because narcissists, by their nature, are pathological liars. So they are going to lie about things that you said, you didn't say, conversations that took place or didn't take place, what they said or didn't say, whatever it is, it's going to be twisted, it's going to be manipulated. So you want to make sure that you can keep everything in writing to the extent that that's possible. So, and ideally it would be like in an email or something like that, where you actually have the timestamp on it, you have the date stamp on it, you have the email, who it came from, the email address of who it came from, who it went to, that sort of thing. Text messages are admissible in court nowadays, but it's just a little bit more difficult to authenticate them when it comes to evidence in court. So it is better if you can do it via email if possible. The other problem with text messages is that they tend to go away after a certain period of time. And especially if you don't save them, it's really difficult to go back and find them. The phone companies don't even really keep them either. So you're definitely going to want to make sure that you use email if possible. If you're co-parenting, having a co-parenting app such as Talking Parents or Fair or Our Family Wizard, something like that is always a good idea too. I mean, the bottom line is that they're going to try to get you away from this writing. They don't want to be in writing because they know that it will box them in, and narcissists don't want to be boxed in. So they're going to do whatever they can to get you to meet with them, to go against what you said before, things like that. They're just, you know, let's just meet. We don't need the writing. We don't need all these other people around us, you know, let's just meet at Starbucks or whatever. And the reason why they're doing that is to get you into a place where they can manipulate you again. So by keeping everything in writing as much as possible, you can minimize that problem. Now, what the flip side of this, by the way, is for you to remember that every single writing is a potential trial exhibit. So if you don't want to see it again, then don't put it in writing. The way I just say it to people is, you know, just imagine the judge is leaning over your shoulder and watching you write that text or that email. And before you hit send, say, you know, Judge, Your Honor, is this something that you would want to see? And if it's not, then you don't want to send it. Okay, the second thing that you're going to want to do is use video for depositions. And the reason why you're going to want to do this, and yes, it's a little bit more expensive. You have to pay for the court reporter. Now you have to pay for the videographer. But it goes back again to boxing that narcissist in. If you box them in enough, then they will act like the spoiled temper tantrum child, and their true colors will show up, and you'll be able to use that against them down the road. So, but you know, just trying to control their behavior using video will definitely help, because if you don't use video, what they tend to do is do things that don't show up on the record, meaning the court reporter will take down everything that's actually said in the deposition. When you look at the deposition transcript, it'll just say question, blah, 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 answer, blah, blah, blah. There's nothing around it. There's no description given around it. So if that narcissist is giving you dirty looks, making faces, all the things that they do, and they do, then nothing is taken down. Now, for me as a lawyer, there have been many times where I've had to say, let the record reflect that so-and-so is making faces at so-and-so. But, you know, how many times can the lawyer do that over and over again without just constantly interrupting the deposition? So by videoing it, you actually see what how they're responding and how they're acting. Plus, it makes them behave a little bit better because they're a little less likely to be a complete jackass if there's a video shining in their face. If this is all sounding really good to you so far, put a thumbs up in the comments. Okay, number 3 is focus on your own case. So this is one of the biggest mistakes that I see lawyers make. I see lots and lots of people make, because it's just natural to want to focus on what's the other side doing and all of their flaws and all of their mistakes and how is he or she getting away with this and look at how badly they're behaving and isn't the judge going to see that? And the answer is maybe and probably, and yeah, you will want to bring out all of the other bad behavior of the other side. But, you know, just like in football, if all you have is a good defense and you have no offense whatsoever, then you never score any points, right? So you want to make sure that your case is as strong as possible. Focus on your case. Make sure that the facts and the supporting documentation and everything is done to create your case and make sure it's super strong. And then for the other side, you create that leverage to help motivate them into wanting to come to the table to potentially have a settlement conversation with you. Or, you know, you have all the points that make them look bad. Yes, you know, anything that shoots their credibility. You know, when people say, oh, how are they getting away with this? They're lying all the time. Why? How are they getting away with this? So the thing I want you to remember, here's a good reality check for you, and that is, who would stop them from getting away with something? The only person who has any power over another human being in the court system is the judge, not the lawyers, not you, not family members. No one has the power to order someone to do anything other than the judge. And how do you get in front of the judge? Through motions, through hearings, through trials, things like that. Things have to be filed in the court system, and then you have to have a hearing, bring it to the judge's attention, and only at that point can you potentially rein in their behavior. But while you're waiting for that time to get in front of the judge, you're just documenting, you're keeping track, keeping track, keeping track. So that's how you're building your case. If you're dealing with a child custody situation, for example, and the person just never shows up to get the kids, or they show up late, or they constantly change the time, you just document it, document it, document it, and then when it comes time to present that to the court, you have a nice log of exactly what happened and when, what time did they show up, what time did they leave, you know, all of that. So eventually it will work in your favor. But just remember that you want to keep track of your own case and make sure that that is bolstered as much as possible, and then highlight the weaknesses of the other person as well. Okay, number 4 is what I started to allude to in number 3, which is document, document, document. And I cannot stress this enough. Keep really careful notes. Have an app open on your phone. Have a journal, a log, whatever you need to do so that wherever you are, real time, you can be logging what's happening. And I have won entire cases on these types of logs. Let me tell you, they do work. It is critically important. So make sure that you're documenting, because what you're doing is you're slowly closing in on your narcissist from every angle. It's you know, this is war. This is the art of war. And so you're building these tactics and you're closing in on them from various different angles. And it doesn't look like you're doing much until you've got them fully surrounded. And that's when you realize, hey, I have them. And only then is when they're going to want to start to have a conversation with you about potentially settling the case and not having to go to court, because you know that the main thing about a narcissist is that they don't want to look back. I have a lot more on this in my videos on how to negotiate with a narcissist and how to negotiate with a narcissist ex. And I will drop links below to those videos. You'll definitely want to check those out. Okay, number 5, definitely do very thorough research. Have everything ready to go. Do you need appraisals? Do you need valuations? Do you need a forensic accountant? Do we need to figure out what the person's true income is by looking at their bank records? Do we need to figure out a lifestyle analysis by looking at credit card statements and bank statements and things like that? Everything needs to be ready to go, all I's dotted, all T's crossed. Don't leave any stone unturned. Don't leave anything to winging it, because whatever your weaknesses are, wherever there's that weakness in your case, that's where they're going to find you, and that's where they're going to jam their foot in and open that door and make it into a big, huge thing. So also, in being prepared, you're going to want to make sure that you do all the research for the other side. What are they going to argue? What points do they have against me? What leverage do they have against me? And then be ready to answer that. I anticipated this argument, and here's my response. Because if you're only prepared for your side, then you are only half ready to go. So make sure that you are ready for both sides, as if you're preparing for both sides. And one word about leverage, by the way, is make sure that once you've got that leverage, you use it at the most opportune time. Do not give it away too early. Do not show it to them before you get to court, because you want to use it when you need it. All right, so the last one, number 6, is to keep your emotions in check. And this is going to be one of the hardest things to do, because narcissists know how to push your buttons and they know how to manipulate you. So they're going to make faces, they're going to make little snarky comments, they're going to say things under their breath. And, you know, so I would totally avoid making eye contact with them in the courtroom. It's not going to serve you. Just look at the judge. When you're testifying, just look at the judge. Make sure that you've practiced your testimony. I, as an attorney, go over my direct testimony with my clients. If your attorney doesn't do that, as a matter of course, ask your attorney to do that with you, or ask them for the questions and have somebody else practice it with you. You want to just be able to at least control the parts that you can control, which is your direct testimony. You should basically know what those questions are going to be. Your attorney will be asking you those questions, and be ready with what you're going to say so that you're not stumped and you're not feeling nervous and anxious. You know exactly, okay, this is that question, here's how I planned to respond to it. I mean, of course, you're going to answer truthfully. You just want to be prepared on how you're going to word your answers, how you're going to say it, what things you want to make sure to get in, what things you want to make sure to say, things like that. So, so that's your direct testimony. Now, as for your cross-examination, you should also see if your lawyer, I know I usually do this as a matter of course. I tell my clients what to expect for cross-examination too. I even sometimes get another lawyer in my office to do a mock cross-examination with the person and sort of beat them up a little bit, just so that they're ready. You know, the kinds of questions that I would ask under cross-examination, something like that. So the more you can be prepared, the less emotional you will be, the less anxious you will be. Now, you're dealing with a narcissist in a court setting, and you're feeling like they just always get their way. I've dealt with it so many times where people will come into my office, even in the beginning of a case, and say, I think that they're going to fool everyone because the person who's the narcissist is going to win, is going to get everybody to believe that they're wonderful and I'm horrible. And narcissists do start their smear campaigns in that in that discard phase. And if you want to know more about what the signs are of a smear campaign, definitely check out my video on signs of a narcissist smear campaign. But once that smear campaign starts, they're in this mode of trying to make sure that you're the one that looks bad and they're the one that looks good. So they're going to be kind of love bombing everybody in the system, including the judges, including their lawyer, your lawyer even. And if there's a custody evaluator involved, they're going to be love bombing that person. And they're going to be trying to make you look like you're the bad one. So they may be filing bogus motions. They may be calling you an abuser, really horrible things. I've seen, really good parents be the victim of the other parent saying, that parent is an abuser, or that parent is unfit, or that parent is a drug addict, or something like that. And you're sitting there thinking, I'm like having coffee in my house, I don't really know. But they start that, and they not only say it to people sometimes, they actually even put it in pleadings. You'll actually see a motion or something that is filled with lies. And you think, how are they getting away with this? How are they getting away with this? I can't tell you how many clients I've heard say to me, how are they getting away with this? Well, let me just first address that. The one thing that you have to remember is that the only person who has any power to order somebody to do something is the judge, no one else. I actually had a client say to me, you've done nothing to control him and his behavior. And I remember thinking, what would I do other than file motions? Because that's the power that your lawyer has, is to file something with the court. But remember, when something is filed with the court, it just sits there in the clerk's file, doesn't do anything until a hearing is actually had, because those filings are, for the most part, not evidence that can be accepted into the court system, actually in a hearing setting. So once that motion is filed, then you can go in front of a judge. And that's how you can start exposing the narcissist in court. How do you do it? You do it by not actually saying the person is a narcissist. Don't use the word narcissist in court. I actually have a whole video on that. Make sure you check that out on whether you can even use the word narcissist in court. But what you're going to do is you're going to actually have other ways that you can expose this narcissist for their behavior. And you do that very systematically. There's no magic wand. There's no go buy this thing and that's going to be the thing, other than the SLAY program, because the SLAY program will show you how to do that. But what you're going to be doing is creating documentation and exhibits that actually systematically show that that person is a bad person. And you want to do it in light of the statutes, in light of something that the judge is going to care about. Because remember, the judge has to apply the law. That's the judge's job. So what a judge will do is they'll listen to that side, they'll listen to this side, but remember, they just get a little teeny snapshot. You might have been dealing with this person for 15 or 20 years. You get like a couple of hours in front of a judge to expose this person. So you want to make sure it's good. You want to make sure that it packs a punch. So you're going to create summaries, for example, of when the person lied, and then have all your supporting documentation attached to it, or create summaries of when they didn't pick up the kids, or didn't show up on time, or bad-mouthed you, something like that. But you're going to do it in light of the statute. So if the best interest of the child statute says that parents are supposed to foster a close and continuing relationship between the children and the other parent, and you've got tons of text messages where they're saying to the kids that, the other parent is an alcoholic, or neglectful, doesn't want you, or something like that,
those become wonderful trial exhibits. So, you know, you're actually giving the judge something that they can hold on to, that they can use when they're applying that law, that actually gives you the results that you actually want. Just going in and saying that person is a narcissist isn't going to get you anywhere. So that's not how you expose them. You expose them by actually doing your homework, which a lot of that, I have a 45-page workbook in the SLAY program, so you should definitely check that out. But that's how you're ultimately going to expose them, by systematically using the information that you have and putting it together in light of the statutes that the judge is actually going to care about. That's how you will expose them. And if you are so ready to expose that narcissist in court, give me an expose the truth in the comments. So remember that narcissists feed off of narcissistic supply, and one of the things that they're going to do is try to get all the judges and everybody to love them. So what you want to do is create leverage by figuring out which person in the system they're going to respect the most, which is probably the judge, and then create leverage, which is going to potentially threaten to expose them for who they are. So, and if you want to know more about leverage, definitely check out my video on creating leverage. But that's going to be one of the whole keys to this whole thing. That's the L in my SLAY program. So S is strategy and L is leverage. So you want to create this leverage that's going to threaten to expose them, and that way they potentially might even settle. And I know a lot of people think, oh, nobody ever settles with a narcissist. You can never get them to settle, but that is so not true. If you threaten a supply source that's more important for them to keep than the supply that they get from jerking you around in the system, you will be able to resolve your case.
Okay, so before we dive into what to do about that narcissist in a divorce, let me just give you a few highlights of the kinds of tricks and manipulations that they try to pull in a divorce. And believe me, I have seen it all. I've represented them, and I've had them on the other side many, many times. So let me tell you the kinds of patterns. They actually all try to pull the same sort of tricks. So let me tell you the kinds of things that they do. Okay, the number one thing that they try to do is win at all costs. They are going to try to make you look as bad as possible, no matter how ridiculous it seems. They're going to twist everything. And that's why I tell you to put everything in writing. We're going to talk about more of that in a minute. But everything you say, do, or the way you breathe is going to be try to twist it and manipulate it and in whatever way possible so that they look good and you look bad, because they're going to try to win at all costs. So here is number two, the things that they do. And here's the crazy part, because despite what I just said about them going to try to win at all costs, winning is actually not what they want to do. What they want to do is get the best of you. That's actually what they want to do. It's going to look like they're winning at all, trying to win at all costs, but what they're actually trying to do is manipulate you at all costs. So just remember that now that you are stepping out of their world, you don't have any more value for them. Because for a narcissist, people only have value to the extent that they can use them for their own potential gain. So now that you're stepping out of that and you have no more potential gain for them, now the only goal is just to manipulate you and make your life miserable. Number three thing they try to do is use the court system as their sword. So they're going to file as many motions as possible, litigate as much as possible, make you spend as much money as possible, and make your life miserable by dragging you through the court system. Unfortunately, that's number three. Number four thing they try to do in a divorce is actually kind of related to number three, but it's its own separate category, and that is they try to obstruct you from everything. So They're not going to provide the discovery that they're supposed to. They're just going to make you work for everything. And so as part of that, you're going to end up having to file motions to compel, and you're going to have to be running up the fees and that sort of thing. And they'll have court orders and they're not going to obey them. And you're going to be sitting there going, how in the heck can he or she get away with this? Well, the bottom line is that the only person who has any power over anyone is the judge. So they get away with it until you get back in front of a judge and tell them what they've been doing. So that's number 4, obstruction. If this sounds familiar to you, give me an amen in the comments.
By the end of this video, I'm going to give you 5 ways to make sure that you beat a narcissist in court. So you're going to want to make sure you stay till the end. You're going to want to make sure that you save this video. You're going to want to make sure you share it out. You're going to want to make sure that you go ahead and watch it over and over again, because I'm going to give you all the ways to make sure that you beat a narcissist in court. Okay. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to remember the acronym, knock 'em dead. All right. So DEADD. So 2 D's, but DEADD, knock 'em dead. So the first D stands for document everything. And I mean everything. You know, you're going to want to journal everything. You're going to want to document everything. In my Slay program, I actually have 12 different things that you're going to want to be documenting, but you're going to want to document everything with regard to finances, to your children, if you have children, anything that they do that seems out of the ordinary. I know it's a pain, but you know, if you have a notes app or something, just note it, because you're not going to remember. But you know, even if it's crazy, oh, I don't know if I should write that down, but you know, you just never know. And there's many different ways that these things come into play. So you will want to make sure that you document everything, whether it's a business case or a family law case, or it's against a business partner. Maybe it's a case against an employer or something like that. It always is something that you're going to need to be doing, is documenting. Whether it's a timeline form, you end up needing it for the statutes to prove different elements of a statute. You definitely need documentation. I also have a podcast where I ended up interviewing one of the people who use my Slay for Biz program, Sharon Scott. I highly recommend that you check that out, because she talked about how she used my program and it really helped her a lot. So definitely document everything. The next thing is the E, emotions. Keep them in check. You're definitely going to want to keep your emotions in check. There's so many different reasons that you want to keep your emotions in check. I mean, for one thing is that they want to trigger you constantly. They love to see you squirm, so they get supply from it. And you really don't want to give them narcissistic supply, obviously, because that's no fun. I mean, they just get the satisfaction of seeing you go crazy, right? I mean, why do you want to do that? But then the next thing is that they use your reaction against you. They go, look, there's the crazy one. There's the one that's the problem. And they will use that against you in a number of ways. They use the emails against you, the texts against you. They may even be videotaping against you. They use the witnesses against you, whatever it is. So definitely keep your emotions in check. They use it for custody, so many different things. So definitely E, keep your emotions in check. And it doesn't help you when you're negotiating either if you're all over the place when it comes to settlements, because then you end up settling for things that you regret 2 months down the road, 3 months down the road. You're like, I didn't want to settle for that. Because a lot of times you're like, oh, I just ended up settling for that because I just wanted it to be done. I just wanted it to be over with, or maybe you were just feeling pressured. You know, really try to keep your emotions in check. And by the way, if you're really, really struggling with that, because a lot of times when you've been dealing with a narcissist for a long period of time, you are in a trauma state, especially PTSD sometimes. I do have a partnership with BetterHelp. You can go to betterhelp.com/Rebecca Zung. I do receive commissions on that. It doesn't cost you anymore. We have a partnership with them because I wanted to have a partnership with a service that we could trust, that we could recommend. If you are struggling go to betterhelp.com/Rebecca Zung so that you can get the help and support that you need if you're having trouble with your emotions and you're having trouble with trauma. So that's the E. The next one is always wear the white hat. That's the A. Always wear the white hat. And what do I mean by that? I mean by that in that you want to be the one, if you end up in front of the judge, which that's what this is about, you want to be the one where the judge is like, hey, this is the person that obviously is the good one. Let the narcissist be the one who's badly behaving. A lot of times it's so easy to fall into, hey, they're behaving badly. They're doing things wrong. They did it too. I can do it too. What happens though is then you have a situation where the judge is just like seeing like two kids that are fighting. So for those of you who are out there watching who have children and you have more than one, what happens is they just are like, oh, both of you just stop it. You know, they don't see that, oh, well, they started it or they're worse. They just see two people who just are fighting. So you want to be the one who's consistently not being in the mud with the other one. Because if you are the one who's what I call always wearing the white hat, who's not engaging, who didn't respond, who didn't get into it, and the other one is always the one who's constantly the badly behaved one, then it makes it really, really obvious who is the bad one. And it's kind of hand in hand with keeping your emotions in check, but it's even one step much, much further than that. You really, really want to be the one who's just always behaving, always doing the right thing. So just kind of imagine that the judge is sort of walking around with you and watching every single thing that you're doing. Always wear the white hat. That's the A. All right. So the next one is don't go anywhere alone. That's the D, the first D in Knock 'em Dead. And we're going through all the elements of what to do to beat a narcissist in court. So, you know, this is because they're going to say you followed them, you did this, you did that. They lie all the time. So they're constantly going to be saying that you were menacing, that you were threatening, that you did this with the kids, or that you touched somebody inappropriately, or whatever it is that they make up constantly. And then you end up having to defend against these ridiculous claims. So you want to make sure that you have people around as much as you possibly can. If you have children, for example, have your exchanges for custody at daycares, at schools, you know, at shopping plazas or places where people are around, because you just don't want situations where they can make things up about what's going on. And in that same vein, by the way, you're going to want to make sure that even depositions are videotaped if possible. And I have actually a whole video on how to beat a narcissist in mediation. I talk about that in there, and you should definitely check out that video as well, because a lot of you who are trying to beat a narcissist in court are also mediating with a narcissist, and you should definitely check out that video as well. And I also do have a whole video where I interviewed Judge Lynn Toller. You guys should definitely check out that video too. She was the judge on divorce court for 17 years, and her video interview was very, very highly fascinating. So definitely check that out too. And if you guys are so ready to knock them dead, put knock them dead in the comments, because I'm so ready to help you knock them dead. And if you've been following along with how to beat a narcissist in court, and you've been following along with my acronym, you know there's one more D. The last D is decoys. It stands for decoys. And what I mean by decoys is you really do not want to give them your best offer or give them any of your best evidence or show them any of your cards or show them any of your hands until you're ready to unveil it in court or when you're ready. I mean, a lot of times while you're standing on the courthouse steps or even at lunch during the trial, they want to settle, they're ready to have settlement talks, or even maybe the eve before trial or a couple of days before, they're ready to have some settlement talks at that point or something. And you might be ready at that point as well, but you've got to have your strategy, your leverage, have anticipated, your focus on you, your position, that being on the offensive, my whole slay methodology. At that point, you do not give them your best offer. You do not show your best evidence. You decoy the whole thing until you are so ready to go. Basically, the way I look at it is you're building an invisible fence around them until you turn on the lights and they realize, oh my God, I'm totally pinned in. At that point, they have no choice but to resolve the issue with you or resolve the issues with you. So you're appearing weak, you're feigning ignorance, you know, oh, I don't know, I have no idea. Let them think that they're winning. Let them go all crazy on you. Allow them to go off. A lot of times that's good for you. It's hard, I know, because you don't want them to get away with anything a lot of times during the case. But sometimes if you have an ongoing case, it's good to let them screw up, because those little battles that show that they're screwing up help you to demonstrate to the judge who they actually are. So let them do that, you know, because then you can show patterns that they aren't doing what they're supposed to do, show patterns that they're liars, show patterns that they are bad parents or terrible with money or whatever it is that you need to show. It actually ends up helping you in the end, or that they have anger issues or whatever it is. So that definitely helps you. Sometimes it's really, really good to feign that you're weak, feign that you're ignorant. A lot of times, by the way, you can pretend like there's a particular thing that you really, really want, and it's not the thing that you really, really want, because then, you know, they go after that, you know, because they're going to go after the thing that they think that you really, really want, right? So let them go after that particular thing.
I was fascinated to learn that you've actually had to deal with that. You've had your father was bipolar. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, having some kind of identifiable mental health issue always puts you in a category of people that other people don't understand. And narcissism is one thing, bipolar is another thing. But what you have to do is understand the nature of the thing that you're dealing with. To expect someone who is bipolar or narcissistic to engage with you in a manner that other people would engage with is going to set up an expectation that will necessarily leave you disappointed. So what you need to do is understand what that particular thing means in that particular circumstance, and understand what works with them, not what should work or not what people should do, but what works with them. And then you work with that. For instance, with my father, there were certain things that you could say to him that will give you a couple of extra seconds to leave the room or whatever it is you needed to do to deal with it. So it's to understand is to have power, even though you don't understand the behavior in and of itself. To understand it as a function of whatever mental health issue they have is power in your pocket.
So, and I love that. There's a couple of things that went through my mind as you're saying these things.
One of the things that came up when I was doing the research of you is you were talking about whether or not you think people actually know that they're mentally ill. Do they know if they have a problem like narcissism or whatever it is? What do you think?
Many don't. Many don't. I think these days more do because we are more apt to speak about it and talk about it, and it has less of a stigma, even though the stigma is still great. Now, with a narcissist, uh, you are less likely to get that kind of introspection because one of the key elements of being a narcissist is that you're not introspective, that you don't have any. So that's not going to happen. But
No.
like bipolar, yeah, okay, that's what it is. That's what I'm dealing with. There's medications, there's therapies, there's there's up, there's down, and there's a way to deal with them. But narcissism doesn't lend itself to self-knowledge.
No, it does not. No, they're probably the worst ones for that,
Oh, absolutely.
frankly.
Yeah.
Have you seen a lot of narcissists in dealing with your cases as a judge?
I did. And I used to call them, we didn't talk about narcissism back in the early 90s, which is when I became a judge in Cleveland Heights. I was a criminal judge. I used to call them people with persistent personalities because I ran into this certain segment of the population where their personality was so extraordinarily persistent that they had to win every argument, either it was a neighbor or a wife or something, every argument all the time. No, they were just, their personality was so persistent. So that was my alliterative way of describing what now I
PPP
see
before
as a
PPP.
narcissist. Right, exactly.
So, do you think, I'm just thinking when you say people with persistent personalities, in a lot of ways, persistence actually helps people get somewhere, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So,
I meant persistent personality, and it was a very defined phrase and term because persistence is how you get to where you and I are, which is doing things that we love.
well, yeah, but there's a school of thought out there that narcissists actually are oftentimes very successful. And why is that? Probably because they're extremely persistent, right?
Right, exactly. And everything that you have emotionally and mentally, it has a good side and a bad side. You know what I mean? It can allow you to do certain things. My father's bipolarity allowed him to, when he was manic, engage in some very uh, uh, positive things because he simply was unafraid when he was manic and he could do anything.
Interesting. So I want to get into all the court stuff, but I also want to ask you sort of a background question, because a lot of the people who follow me and watch me, who are part of my audience and my community, are dealing with massive amounts of depression and anxiety because they have been dealing with somebody who's been basically abusive. It's very, very traumatic. And you have been actually very open, surprisingly open, but wonderfully open in a lot of ways. It's so very inspirational about the struggles that you've had with both of those, depression and anxiety. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you were able to overcome that?
Yeah, I do suffer from depression and anxiety. My sister calls it shadow traits from whatever my father was dealing with, and then there's a strong genetic component. But I raise my hand to that all the time because if I look at my anxiety and depression, back in the day when you're first in it, you think, I feel appropriate to my circumstances because the world is horrible. Everything is out of control, and you perseverate over problems, and you feel like that's necessary to remain up in it. But once I named it and claimed it, I saw it as that was something I was fighting against, not the circumstance that caused me worry or anxiety, but the worry and anxiety itself. And having isolated that, I do things to fight that in isolation, separate and apart from the fight I have with whomever I'm dealing with.
Yeah, I think that's very, very good. And also, I think that you had to have some sort of
way to overcome this idea that I'm a victim. You know, my dad was this way, this was hard. You know, you went to Harvard and Penn, for God's sake. I mean, so obviously you figured out a way to say, I'm not a victim to this.
Right.
This isn't going to own me. How did you do that?
I can't take credit for that. That was my parents. I was born in 1959, and my sister and I integrated in all white lower middle class.
Can we all just take a moment to go, oh my God, you look amazing?
Thank
And
you. You could always
I
take
can't just like let that go by. That's incredible. Okay, keep going.
And so we integrated to school in 1963 and 64. And when we would come home to our parents talking about what the kids said to us, or this, that, or the other, they would simply ask, well, what are your grades like? And he goes, I didn't send you there to make friends. I sent you there to make A's. You don't have all A's. I don't want to hear about it. And my parents, because my father was born in 1990, my mother was born in 1930, they brooked no excuses at any juncture, anywhere, at any time. And I was raised without the ability to raise excuses. So I don't, because I don't know how.
That's your next book, No Excuses.
Right?
I love that. I love that. Okay, so I want to get into the judicial system. I have a huge community, and a lot of people say the judicial system is broken. It favors narcissists. What would you say about that?
I don't think the judicial system favors narcissists any more than any other system that the narcissist engages in. In other words, they take no prisoners and they don't back down, and a certain amount of fight will behoove you or inure to your benefit no matter what system you're in. The system is designed to level the playing field, that everybody should have the same rights. It's supposed to be, you know, the young lady with the balance and you know, blinded to who's before them. Simply, it should be the issues and right or wrong. But narcissists can bully anybody, and judges can be bullied too. They're just people. But I think they try very hard. First of all, they won't know he's a narcissist off the bat. He or she, that's right. He or she is a narcissist off the bat. So they have to learn that and figure it out. So it takes time. The person who comes in already knows, but the judge doesn't know. So it takes some time to figure that out. And don't get in the habit of trying to one up the narcissist before the judge and the outrage, because judges will, in the beginning, if they see it, they can take it into account in what they say and what they hear and what they believe, and who has the more rational sense about them. So rationality should will out in most circumstance. It won't seem that way in the beginning because the judge needs run-up time.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people all the time that the court system is beleaguered in a lot of ways.
Oh.
I mean, judges have way too many cases on their dockets, and I tell people that they do get evaluated on how often they get appealed, and what the result is of the appeal, if they get reversed. And they also are evaluated on how quickly they move cases off their dockets. Right. And so I think that judges feel a tremendous amount of pressure. Would you agree with me on that?
Oh, absolutely. And the system, to that extent, the system is broken. And I think that we as a society has asked the judicial system to fix a lot of things that it wasn't designed to fix. You have waves of social ills and these waves of divorce and stuff. And the system wasn't designed for that. It was designed for the peculiar, odd thing. And now everybody's running to court all the time. So yes, yeah. It is an overwhelmed system.
Yeah. I mean, you know, depending on whatever the filing fee is, $400 or whatever, my husband always says anybody can file anything if they have $400 burning a hole in their pocket.
And they do.
And they do. And the other thing that I'd love for you to speak on is I talk often about the difference between divorce law and divorce justice. Right. You know, and that is, you know, judges are tasked to apply the law. That's their job. That's your job. They're not tasked to, punish somebody because they cheated, because, they left the other person or something like that. Can you talk more about that?
I'm going to say something about my bias. I think the legislator punted a little bit, especially in community property states where that's not our job to say who was right and who was wrong. Some states have gotten the idea of marital misconduct, which I'm sure you know about, when, I've spent all my money on my mistress. And so that won't be, so you can make some accountability for bad behavior. But for the most part, the justice system is not interested. It is no fault. And it is simply an unwinding of economics and property. And it is unrelated to the conduct that caused the crisis in the first place. So you have to get next to that in the very, very beginning, especially if you've been dumped upon in the process of the marriage.
Totally, totally. I mean, I will say, and I'd love to get your opinion on this too. I tell people all the time that no fault simply doesn't, it means that you don't have to prove fault in order to get a divorce, right? So, but it doesn't mean fault never matters. I mean, I tell people that judges are humans. And so if you shock the judicial conscience, the judges can develop a bias.
Yeah.
Because they're making decisions about who to believe or not. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, we are making decisions about who to believe, and I will cop to another concern that I have about the system is I think judges need to be better trained to separate themselves from their own emotionality. It's like I was 34 years old when I took the bench. They gave me a robe and set me in the chair and said, "Good luck to you, sweetie." And I learned throughout the time there that I had to separate how I felt about something because it may be a function of something that's happened to me personally. Because as like I think Benjamin Cardozo said, it's like the waves of emotion don't just get up and pass the judges by. We do feel things, and we have to be able to separate how we feel and how what we are seeing makes us feel from what we are really doing, what we really need to do.
Yeah, but it's not always easy, right? Because
it's never easy. Yeah, because your emotions are so close to you, and you feel far faster than you think. And if you are, it's almost impossible to eradicate your emotional response to everything. But I think that given better training, I think the police and judges, we can deal with our emotional biases, prejudices, fears in order so we don't pass them along or we don't see them through the prism of those peculiarities or peccadillos.
Yeah. So a lot of people are concerned that the narcissist is going to lie to the judge over and over again. And I've seen them lie.
Right.
And I've seen them get away with their lies.
Right.
And, there have been times when I've seen them say one thing and then 20 minutes later on the stand, say something different. And yet the judge ruled for them. I mean, as a lawyer, it can be very frustrating myself as well. And I think, did you not just notice the inconsistency over there? Like, what's going on? But a lot of people are concerned. And so I would love for you to weigh in on what advice you would give to people who are going, I feel like I can never win because they're just going to lie.
Hopefully most judges will, because especially if you lie early and we catch you, we don't, it diminishes the trust we have in you altogether once we're caught in a lie. So the calm and continued exposition of what is going on by the attorney, and sometimes you got to remember, it took you a minute to figure out that he or she was a narcissist to begin with. And it's going to take the judge a minute as well.
Oh, that's so true. That's a really good point.
What I'm saying? When you met him and married him.
That's so true. What a really good point. That is such a good point. And what I tell people to do is, create summaries of their lies and inconsistent statements, like have a text message that says this on one day and another thing that says this. And it makes it easy for the judge to go, oh, okay, I can see the story here.
Right.
So would you agree with that? That's
Oh,
helpful.
absolutely. Consistent papering of what is occurring and to put it in, because you 20 minutes on my docket today. So if you put it in, if it's just all over the place, I can't get there with you. But if it's concrete for me, I can get there.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love that. And so, okay, so here's another question that I get a lot. People think the judge, they've been in front of the judge a couple of times. Maybe it's been on a discovery motion, or maybe it's been on a motion to compel, or a motion to enforce an order, or something like that. And the judge has ruled against them. So now they think that the judge is favoring the narcissist, that they're biased, they want to get rid of the judge or whatever. What would you say to that?
Always talk to your attorney first, because there's a lot of reasons you can lose a motion, and not necessarily be a function of a factual determination made in favor of the narcissist and against you. There could be legal reasons why it is. And so really talk to your attorney, and talk to your attorney the with the understanding that you're trying to determine what it was that made the motion unsuccessful on your part, because you'll go first to the thing that bothers you the most, which is their narcissism. But you have to be able to really understand. Sometimes you lose a motion because of the legal particulars of it, and sometimes it's because of the lie the narcissist told. But in order not to get consumed by that, you have to really listen to your attorney and come to their attorney with a clear head about, I'm going to accept what he or she is telling me about the reasons that our motions were denied or granted.
And it's not always the end of the story either.
Nope.
I mean, because, as you go in front of the judge more and more, oftentimes it gets turned around. Oftentimes the judge
Patterns emerge.
Say it again.
Patterns emerge.
Exactly. And the judge starts to see, but it's really hard. And I want you to speak to this as well, which is, if somebody just comes in and says that person is a narcissist, what would you say to that?
I need evidence. I don't need conclusions. And I think that some people do come up with that person's a narcissist, and they could be a jerk or a fool. They're different levels of jerkdom. And you not necessarily diagnosable just because you're some level of a jerk. So don't come in screaming the concern of the day. Narcissism isn't the concern of the day, but it's the new.
It's the word du jour.
Yeah, it really is.
Saying it. And so, and what I tell people is that, it's almost like two kids fighting, like if you're a parent and both kids come in, she started it, no, she started it, no, she's the jerk, no, he's the jerk. But the judge is just like, oh, both of you stop it.
So don't come in here making diagnoses, because don't come in crazy. Come in calm with me. If you come in all wild and out with all of the extremities, you got to come in cool, because I will listen longer and harder. And if you're normally a rational and calm person and there's some excitation later on, I will see it more as a circumstance that arose as a function of events, as opposed to tag you with hysterical, crazy dude or chick.
Love that. And that actually brings me to the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about. You are an expert in emotional control, and you wrote a whole book on it. It's called My Mother's Rules, A Practical Guide to Becoming an Emotional Genius. What's that?
That was very cheeky of me. It was a grand claim, but
I love it. And since you wrote this book, and since I teach people how to negotiate with narcissists, I would love to talk with you about the lessons that your mother taught you and the lessons that you have learned in dealing with people who are extremely difficult, volatile, toxic, use whatever word you want to use. But when somebody is erratic, when somebody is volatile, it's very difficult to deal with them on an emotional level. And, I would say keeping your emotions in check is one of the most important things to do when you are negotiating. Would you agree with me on that?
Absolutely. Part of a narcissist's power is the ability to destabilize you. That's part of their power, just to upset you and make you wobble. So I always think of my emotional life as separate and apart from my functional life, from my physical life. And so even in the midst of craziness, you got to have 15 minutes a day doing exercise or something joyful, where that person is put into the closet because he cannot or she cannot live in the forefront of your mind all the time, because he or she will be working against you all of the time. You still, this is an unwinding of a past life. It is not your present. You know what I mean? It's transitional in nature, and you have to make sure that you cradle your emotionality and how good you feel consciously. You got to make it pursue. It's from 7 to 8. I'm going to do whatever it takes, not whatever it takes, but I'm going to feel better. I'm going to do things and live and be in the moment, and not simply be a divorcing person.
Yeah, and even if, I also teach people how to negotiate in business as well. But regardless of who the person is that you're dealing with, if they're a narcissist, they know how to prey on your emotions. They know how to trigger you.
Right.
So, what would you say to somebody who is in the moment?
Mhm.
They're in the mediation, or they're in the arbitration, or they're in the courtroom, and the person is saying things to absolutely trigger the other person. You're a thief, you're a liar, you're the narcissist, whatever they want to say to have you go, are you crazy? Are you kidding me? It's like that first instinct to just defend yourself. What would you say to them?
I always say, in any fight you have, no matter who it's with, the first battle is always with yourself. So you go in there knowing what's going to happen. You go in there ready to catch those slings and arrows and put them down. Make it a game in your head. Well, that's one. Well, that's two. Well, that's three. Look at him. Look at me. Not having a reaction. Very calm. Take a look at your neck. Whatever you got to do to get you to deliver an emotional response that'll freak them out, because they're not delivering, because you're not delivering to them what they expect. It's almost a game. Like, I take pleasure in not getting upset and excited with or to people that are trying to upset and excite me. It's fun.
Ah, that's so great. I've often said, like, look at them like as if they're having a 2-year-old, having a tantrum on the floor. Like, you're not going to go get into it, right? But I like it even better that you're saying, like, have fun with it. Just, oh, there they go. There they go.
Yeah, in the middle of issues or problems, somebody's trying to get to me, I always like, oh my God, that is the most beautiful bracelet. Like, what you think of me and what you're thinking is so irrelevant to me. I had time to look at your wardrobe, and I ain't scared of you. You're not frightening me. I'm not in battle with you, because I like your jewelry. And people like, and if you can send people off their game by being on your emotional game.
And what if people just don't feel that way? What do you think about fake it till you make it?
Absolutely. I lie to myself all the time. I'm not afraid of this. Every time before I get on a plane, I got to do a whole bunch of mental gymnastics. I'm like, I am afraid, but I'm just going to get my behind on it and go. So I've been faking it till I made it all my life. If you ask anybody who was raised around me, they were just like shocked at what I do, because I was extraordinarily shy kid, just extraordinarily. So you can fake it till you make it, and then it'll actually become your reality.
Yeah. Each time you face your fear and you do something that you were afraid of, you get a little bit more
A little
courageous.
bit more, a little bit more, and eventually it doesn't bother you as much, and you can just do it.
You have said that your mother was an emotional genius.
Mhm.
Tell me more about that.
She was, and I think it was innate with her. And I think we used to, when I was on the bench, that's when I realized how brilliant she was, because whenever I said anything that made a defendant like hang his head and say, wow, you know what, you got a point, it's because I've taken something that she's taught me, digested it, and reiterated it to him in a fashion that he could understand. And I used to talk, and my mother was very good at dealing with my father, who was bipolar. And I remember she told me a story when she was a little girl. Her mother had put her into an orphanage for Negro children back in the 30s during the Depression. And there was a little girl that used to play in the house next door, and mom used to think, oh, if I could just get out and play with that little girl, everything would be okay. And once she got out of the orphanage, she went running over to the little girl with her arms outstretched and said, little girl, little girl. And the little girl screamed and ran away. And mom said she stopped, looked around. She said, you know what? It ain't no better out here than it wasn't there, and kept it moving. And I just think that's how she, she has the ability to stop and assess how she felt about something. And if it's not borne out, she can put a period on it and do something else. And that's what she taught me.
So, what happens if somebody is super like emotions have gotten red hot in a negotiation? You know, whether it's something your mother has taught you or something you would know. Uh, how would you advise somebody to start to calm that down and bring the temperature down a little bit?
You can always excuse yourself from the table. I mean, and I did this not too long ago in another thing, but it's just I give voice to I can't speak right now. I'm upset. I actually give voice to it. Or I exit myself from the room, or I used to have all kinds of things, things that I would snap on my wrist, or things that I would read. It's going to be all right, or whatever it is. I used to have on my screensaver. Are you fixing, or are you worrying? There are a whole lot of dumb little things you can do to remind you that this is a moment of time and a piece of history, and you've got a beautiful long life ahead of you, and this is just something that we got to get through.
I love that. And what about if somebody is just being extremely disrespectful to you right to your face in the middle of a conversation or a negotiation? What would you say to that?
That was really unnecessary, and let it go. Because people will continue to engage in behavior if they know that behavior will agitate you, if that is in fact what they're trying to do. If it doesn't, it loses its fun.
Yeah. And what would you say is the best way for people to communicate as far as trial exhibits?
I don't know. And the legal game has changed so much since I was in the trenches. I would, with technology and all, I would not venture a guess on that one. I'm going to leave that to you.
I usually always say text message, email or court approved app like Our Family Wizard or something like that, or email, just because I think that it's they're the easiest for, as far as timestamps
Mhm.
and being able to see the entire communication, and they have a date and all that sort of thing. That's my opinion. Just because texts are, they don't always have time and date stamps. They are often, you know, way too long to include the entire conversation.
Just
So,
to show you, when I was a judge back in Cleveland, they didn't have text yet.
oh yeah,
This wasn't there. All of that, none of that was there.
this is true. This is a new thing.
Yeah.
So, what is the best advice that you would give to someone who is dealing with a narcissist who is, you know, in a situation where they're just like thinking, I don't know how I'm ever going to get out of this thing? What would you say to them?
Um, my piece has a high price tag. And if I got to let go of some money to get some peace, I will do that. I will not let people walk over me, but I will not let that actual, the vase or whatever, the idea that I need to beat him or her. I need to beat the day, and I beat the day if I find some peace in it. And that, they're make them ancillary. It's hard to do, but your life is about your day. He or she is just a part of your day, and make them ancillary. It is a job. It is hard, but it is doable.
I like that. And what about boundaries? I just had that thought. Like, I teach people to like create boundaries. Emotionally, physically, whatever boundary type they need to create. What would you say to that?
Oh, I think it's absolutely necessary. During this lockdown, I have boundaries. I'm not allowed to read emails after a certain time because it's not a good time today. I'm only allowed to consume a certain amount of news. I insert limits and boundaries on what I do, so I can be in charge of all of the incoming information, because between Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, you get a lot of emotional incoming from all over, and people are emoting, and they're emoting to the world. And if you're consuming all of that, you're consuming other people's raw emotions, and you don't need to do. So you should limit yourself with respect to the exposure that you have to incoming agitation and irritation.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I also teach people like, as far as like boundaries, sort of like tactical responses, such as if they get a long email that says, you're a deadbeat, you suck in every way, whatever. But there's like one piece in there that says, what time do you want to pick up Johnny on Wednesday? You could just like write back and say, I'm in receipt of your email. I disagree with your allegations, and you can pick up Johnny at 3:00 on Wednesday. Like,
Yeah,
don't
no,
engage.
and I think that's a very, very good idea, because if you don't buy into, they sent it for a reason. They didn't send it to convince you of that. They sent it to upset you. So if they wrote a 20-minute email, took 20 minutes to write a damning email, and then you come back with, yeah, you can pick them up at 9. That's a victory. You need to put that in the win column.
That is a victory. It is so true. I love that you put it like that. That's so great.